Hello, my name is Peyton Sexton and I did my presentation on European growth. Europe was revealed from trade. Towns were beginning to experience a decline in Europe during early Middle Ages. As the Roman cities started to die down, it was not only until the revival of the trade brought merchants in who was beginning to settle there. Following the merchants were craftspeople who developed skills and saw opportunities to trade and make goods that could be sold by merchants. Throughout the course of the 11th and 12th century, Roman cities began to come alive with the new growth of populations. As the late 10th century began to take off, more towns and cities were being founded in Europe, particularly around the northern part of Europe. It started out as the merchants settling near a busy area such as castles or monasteries because castles were known and to be in high traffic trade routes. The castles were also in favor because the lord of the castle would offer protection to the settlers. The lords wanted to treat everyone equally, but with the artisans coming in, it was hard because they needed their own rules protecting themselves to be able to meet their own requirements. However, the artisans were willing to pay what they needed, and in many cases, lords and kings saw that they could also make money and were willing to sell to the townspeople the liberties they were being demanded, including the right to bequeath goods and sell property, freedom from any military obligation to the lord, and written urban laws that guaranteed their freedom. While even some of its towns in Europe were able to govern themselves and had opportunities to choose what officials and how the court law was administered. During the 12th century, a wave of religious enthusiasts seized Europe, which led to the growth of the monasteries and the emergence of new monastic orders. While Christianity was the main religion in Europe, there were other religions that tried to take off with many different rules. During the Middle Ages, most women were nuns, causing a decrease in marriage. As growth and expansion of Europe came many goods to the country. Silver and gold came wealth that Europeans sought out avidly. With the precious metals were imported from Peru, they quadrupled out of greed. However, in the long run, agricultural seemed to be more rewarding. Eventually making their way to Europe was sugar, tobacco, chocolate, precious woods, animal hides, and other natural products. During the High Middle Ages, universities began forming. Women were not allowed to study at the university, therefore the men studied liberal arts that consisted of grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. As time went on, the growth of Europe began to grow. During the year 1750 is when it began to take a large boom and steadily began to increase. Better transportation of food supplies gave the population a less chance of devastating plagues or poor diets, which was a main cause of death previously. As food production increased, more land was farmed and the yields per acre increases along the improvement of the climate. The increased yields were those of cultivation of new vegetables such as corn and potatoes. One of the most famous large solid industries in the 18th century was that of textiles. The master artisans were in a gilded workshop, and the production was shifting to more of a domestic system. This consisted of merchants, capitalist entrepreneur who bought the raw materials, mostly of wool and flax. After they would find wool workers to weave the wool into cloth or simple looms. The entrepreneurs would sell it, finish the product, and use it as a profit to make more materials. This was a process called the cottage industry. The biggest boom was overseas, with trade coming from all over with the money they made in gold and silver that was imported. They were able to buy tea, spices, silk, and cotton goods. Europe's economy underwent its greatest transformation between the late 18th and the late 19th century. The decades of industrial revolution brought a continent whose economy had been based mostly on agriculture and trade into a new era of mass production, heavy industries, and titanic economic growth. The social organizations in Europe were first established in the Middle Ages and continued over into the 18th century. However, society was still divided into the traditional orders or estates, and that was determined on your hereditary. Society in the 18th century was mostly rural, and peasantry constituted the largest social group. They made up of about 85% of the total population. There was a vast variety between the group, and one was the difference between free and peasants and serfs. Serfs were tied to the lands of their noble landlords, and peasants were largely freed. The noble, who only made up 2 to 3% of the total population in Europe, were automatically guaranteed to be at the top, playing the dominant role in society. Being born a noble automatically guaranteed you a spot at the top, and nobles were exempt from many forms of taxation. Since medieval times, landed aristocrats had functioned as militaries, and 18th century nobles had most of the important offices in the administration machinery of state and controlled much life on the local districts. In conclusion, European states and cities had a level of knowledge and technology that enabled them to regularly engage in voyages beyond Europe. Pordenone was a detailed chart that was provided with information on coastal contours, the distances between ports and compasses, and readings. At first, it was hard to get the correct measurements because it did not accumulate how measure curvature of the earth. In time, Europeans possessed a fairly accurate map to know the world. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it.